At exactly 3:15 local time, under the pitch-black skies above the Persian Gulf, an F-35C carrying the call sign Viper 1 moved silently in stealth configuration, maintaining total radio silence as it closed in on the Iranian coastline from 120 nautical miles away. Its objective was OGAB-44, a $2.5 billion underground airbase carved deep inside granite mountains. Then, without warning, everything changed. Inside the pilot's helmet, the radar warning receiver suddenly came alive. 6 separate hard-lock signals from S-400 Triumph and Bavar 373 fire control radars lit up the world's most advanced stealth fighter all at once. That should not have been possible. Earlier cyber operations were supposed to blind Iran's early warning systems. Instead, the exact opposite seemed to be happening. And within just 90 seconds, as many as 40 Sayyad-4B high-speed interceptor missiles could leave their launchers, turning America's billion-dollar flagship aircraft into debris over the Gulf. But Iran had made one critical mistake. While all attention was focused on the F-35, they failed to notice another aircraft just 300 meters away at 45,000 feet, an aircraft that looked more like a commercial airliner than a battlefield platform. Its call sign was Ghost Rider, and it was quietly preparing to activate a highly classified capability. A capability powerful enough to influence the fate of the Middle East that very night. What kind of system could a slow-moving aircraft carry that might shift the balance? How could something that looks so ordinary become the most important player in the sky? The answer over the next 13 minutes would completely change the way you think about modern conflict. Iran's confidence that night was not based on guesswork. It rested on hardened defenses and one of the most impressive deception strategies of the 21st century. The American target, OGAB-44, was far more than a runway. It was an underground military city built to survive even the heaviest bunker-penetrating strikes. Hidden inside were more than 200 updated Shahed 136 drone variants, Su-35 Flanker E fighters recently transferred from Russia, and a stockpile of medium-range ballistic missiles ready for launch. Everything was in place for the F-35 mission. 48 hours earlier, U.S. Cyber Command had quietly launched a large-scale digital operation. Millions of lines of malicious code were pushed into Iran's power grid and national radar network. Inside the Pentagon, screens showed Iran's air defense indicators going dark one by one. To American planners, that meant the system had been neutralized. They believed the battlefield had been shaped before the first shot was even fired. But they underestimated Iran. What the U.S. struck was not the real network. It was a carefully prepared digital decoy, a honeypot designed to draw in cyber attacks, while the true defense architecture around OGAB-44 remained untouched. Iran had also implemented a simple but highly effective safeguard: air gapping. The S-400 and Bavar 373 missile launchers were completely isolated from the internet and even from the national power grid. Instead, they operated on a closed internal network, passing data through fiber optic cables buried 10 meters underground, shielded from remote intrusion and immune to the malware aimed at them. Iran had not only preserved its defenses, it had changed the way it hunted. Rather than using active radars, which broadcast signals and make themselves easy targets, Iran shut them down entirely. In their place, it deployed an upgraded passive sensor network, supported by powerful electro-optical reconnaissance systems hidden across the Zagros mountain peaks. These systems did not emit signals. They listened, they watched, they tracked disturbances in the air and detected the faint infrared signature of the F-35's engines against the cold night sky. Viper 1 had been monitored for 20 minutes without the pilot ever realizing it. Iran stayed patient, maintaining full emissions control. Only when the F-35 entered the kill zone, the point where turning back was no longer realistic, did they activate the S-400 fire control radar for the finishing move. It was the perfect trap. Draw the target deep in, cut off retreat, then strike. Iran believed it had the F-35 boxed in, but that assumption would soon prove costly. Flashback to 0315. The moment the radar lock warning appeared, the Combined Air Operations Center in Qatar immediately shifted to Plan B. They did not send in their strategic asset right away. First, they called in the aircraft designed for direct electronic confrontation. two EA-18G Growler electronic warfare squadrons. Launching from the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, both squadrons accelerated into action, powering up their ALQ-218 receivers and jamming pods at full strength. Within moments, they created a massive wall of electronic interference intended to blind Iran's fire control radars. At the same time, the latest AGM-88GAAR-GMER anti-radiation missiles streaked from their launchers. Traveling at supersonic speed, they followed the radar emissions aimed at the F-35s, homing in on the source with one purpose: force those systems offline or destroy them. For the first 5 minutes, it looked like the plan was working. The lock warnings disappeared from the F-35 cockpit displays. Iran's radio communications seemed overwhelmed by powerful jamming. AARGM-ER missiles drove into transmitters hidden in the mountain valleys, triggering huge explosions that shook the surrounding terrain. The F-35Cs regained control, pushed deeper toward their objective, and prepared to release GBU, 53 Stormbreaker glide bombs toward the underground tunnel entrances. Back in Qatar, American commanders began to relax. It seemed the Growlers had taken control of the fight. But once again, they had underestimated the preparation on the other side. The sudden silence from Iran's defenses was not a sign of fear or collapse. It was discipline. The next phase of the trap was already in motion. Just as the American formation crossed the point of no return, the real defense network came alive. The S-400 radar sites targeted by the Growlers turned out to be little more than inexpensive decoy emitters. Iran's actual defensive backbone, including Bavar, 373, and Cordon 15 missile systems, remained untouched and still hidden. More importantly, they had not relied on radar for initial targeting at all. Instead, they used a distributed electro-optical and infrared observation network spread across high mountain ridges, feeding image data directly into an underground command center through fiber optic links. Because those systems did not use radio emissions to establish the initial track, the Growler's warning receivers had nothing to detect, and the anti-radiation missiles had nothing to lock onto. Then the night sky erupted. Dozens of bright streaks launched upward from mountain crevices as Syed 4B interceptor missiles climbed at nearly Mach 6. Guided first by inertial navigation, using coordinates supplied by the optical network, they waited until the final seconds before activating their onboard radar seekers. That made them especially difficult to counter. The Growlers, built to jam radar frequencies, were suddenly facing a threat that had bypassed their main advantage. The two F-35s had no choice but to break formation, release countermeasures, and pull violent 9G maneuvers just to stay airborne. In seconds, the American attack package was thrown into chaos. Then came the worst possible update. Early warning satellites detected the massive launch doors of OGAB-44 beginning to open. Iran was preparing to launch a wave of ballistic missiles and drones at the exact moment U.S. aircraft were fully occupied. If the Americans pulled back now to save the formation, they risked exposing the Fifth Fleet to a major strike launched directly from the mountains. It was shaping up to be one of the most serious tactical crises the United States had faced in decades. And that is when Ghost Rider stepped out of the shadows. The aircraft was the EA-37B Compass Call. While the fighters below fought to dodge incoming missiles, the EA-37B orbited calmly near the edge of international airspace, closely supported by an RC-135 rivet joint. Unlike the Growler, which relies on brute force jamming, the EA-37B is a far more refined instrument, a platform built for cognitive electronic warfare. It does not simply overwhelm radars, it does not chase missiles. Its true target is something much more valuable: the enemy's confidence in its own command and control system. Iran believed its buried fiber optic network made it untouchable, and for the most part, it was well protected. But there was one weakness. At the junction points where underground cables connected to mobile missile launchers, the system could never be perfectly sealed. Metal connectors, decoding equipment, and transfer nodes inevitably leaked tiny traces of electromagnetic radiation, faint signatures known as side-channel emissions. Those signals were incredibly weak. But the RC-135 rivet joint, with its ultra-sensitive antenna array, was listening for exactly that. And in the silence of the desert, it found the heartbeat. Immediately, soared, an advanced open architecture response system installed aboard the EA-37B came online. Powered by AI, it launched an extremely sophisticated spoofing operation. Through the tiny electromagnetic leaks in Iran's network, it began slipping false data packets into the command stream, quietly distorting the battlefield picture in real time. Iranian missile batteries started receiving firing instructions with a half-second delay, while target coordinates were shifted by nearly 300 meters from the aircraft's real position. It was a near-perfect non-kinetic countermeasure. Rather than physically destroying the missiles, the United States was effectively blinding Iran's precision guidance chain from the inside, using the opponent's own command network against itself. But there was a major risk. To push that false signal strongly enough into such a tightly protected defense system, the EA-37B had to leave the relative safety of standoff range and move directly into the envelope of long-range air defense systems. The Sword transmission package needed to get within 150 miles to break through Iran's physical security layer. It was an all-or-nothing move. Built from a Gulfstream G550 commercial airframe, the EA-37B had no stealth profile, flew at subsonic speed, and carried no conventional self-defense weapons. The 7 crew members aboard knew exactly what that meant. They were about to become one of the easiest targets in the sky. The moment the EA-37B crossed into the danger zone, Iran's passive detection network picked up the change. Inside the OGAB-44 underground command bunker, Iranian operators quickly realized the true threat was no longer the stealth fighters. The real danger was the slow-moving aircraft that looked almost civilian, closing in with quiet purpose. They responded immediately. A reserve S-300 PMU-2 battery, held back until the final moment, was ordered to concentrate all available firepower on the EA-37B. 248N6E3 missiles launched and tore through the sky at nearly Mach 6, racing toward the electronic warfare aircraft. At the same moment, the electronic warfare officer aboard the EA-37B activated the full output of the aircraft's side-mounted AESA emitter system. The crew did not try to physically intercept the incoming missiles. Instead, they directed a focused electronic warfare beam at the missile's data link channels and the ground control node supporting them, while flooding the OGAB-44 network with millions of false coordinate packets. Now the contest was measured in milliseconds. Could the EA-37B corrupt Iran's fire control logic quickly enough to break the missile's targeting chain before impact? When the 2 S-300 missiles closed to just 5 nautical miles, a distance no commercial-style aircraft could realistically escape through maneuvering alone, something extraordinary happened. The missile's guidance systems encountered a severe data conflict. Target information from the command center no longer matched the picture being seen by the missile's own onboard radar. Thanks to the EA-37B's spoofing attack, the guidance logic detected a contradiction so extreme that the missile's own safety protocols interpreted it as possible hijacking. Both missiles triggered self-destruct. 2 bright fireballs bloomed in midair, their shockwaves rippling outward and striking the fragile fuselage of the G550. But the EA-37B remained in the air. And at that exact moment, Iran's integrated air defense system began to unravel. Mobile launchers received corrupted instructions, some ordering shutdown procedures, others causing them to rotate aimlessly. Radar units fell out of synchronization. Most importantly, the hydraulic control software governing the giant bunker doors at OGAB-44 froze after a data conflict fault planted by the EA-37B. The result was critical. The bunker doors jammed half open. That gave the United States a narrow window, roughly 120 seconds of confusion and paralysis. And they used every second of it. From behind the main axis of the battle, a squadron of F-15EX Eagle II fighters, the true heavy payload carriers of the operation, surged in at Mach 2.5. Their goal was not to destroy the entire bunker complex. That would have required far more force than was practical. Instead, they targeted its vulnerability, access. Each aircraft released GBU-72/B bunker-penetrating bombs, dropping them directly into the jammed door openings and ventilation shafts of the base. The resulting explosions were devastating. The internal structure of the mountain complex survived, but the entrances collapsed. Aircraft, drones, and support systems inside were trapped beneath tons of rock and reinforced concrete. OGAB-44 still existed, but it had been transformed into a sealed prison. No aircraft could take off, no drones could launch, no rapid strike could emerge from inside the mountain. The United States had not erased Iran's military capability, and Tehran still retained thousands of missiles spread across other locations. But the strategic message was unmistakable. Washington did not need to level the mountain to achieve its objective. It only needed to make the facility useless. As dawn approached, the EA-37B Ghost Rider turned back toward Al Udeid Air Base, leaving behind a battlefield that had fallen into an eerie silence. A full-scale regional war had been avoided. But something else had begun, a new era of warfare, one in which lines of code, signal manipulation, and electronic deception could shape the outcome faster than conventional firepower. And Iran's deepest concern was not simply the loss of one base. It was the realization that the United States might now possess the means to interfere with the very nervous system of its defense network at will.